Hey everyone, I'm Sarah Fish.
And I'm Brandon Price.
And this is Fish
or Price Ranch.
Good morning everyone, I'm Sarah with Fish or Price Ranch. Welcome back. Today we're going to be doing the second video in the series of raising goats. And today we're going to be talking about shelters and fencing. And this is going to be how to house your goats correctly, or at least the best possible way that you can. So with fencing, we've tried all different kinds, and at least a 4-foot fence will hold in your goats. We've tried, field fencing, we've tried goat and sheep fencing, we've tried welded wire fencing, and we've come to the conclusion that woven wire seems to be the best for our situation. You want a hole in the fence that's no more than 4x4, because you don't want the goats to get their heads stuck in the fence and strangle themselves. So the 2x4 fencing, the 2x4 holes seem to be the best option because even the babies can't get their heads stuck. With the 4x4 fencing, we still had the young ones getting their heads through the fence and then they couldn't get out. So we have had a few goats that have jumped the 4-foot fence, but it's kind of rare. But the thing is, the goats will climb on the fence. They will use their whole body and rub on the fence, so they're going to be bending your fence up and tearing it up pretty good. So electric fencing is your best friend. We use electric wire against our fence to prevent them from getting too close. And so we do it about halfway up the fence. And then at the top of the fence. You can do more strands if you feel you need to, but this usually keeps the goats away from the fence about 2 feet. So there's 2 different ways of raising goats in a pen. And there's dry lot, which is a smaller pen with no grass, and you're feeding them hay year-round. Then there's pasture raising, where you have a large amount of property and you're growing grass so they can graze on the land. Doing the pasture raising, you will still probably have to throw hay in the wintertime when the grass is dying, but it just depends on the size of the property that you're going to be using. You can do goats on just 1 acre, even a half an acre. It just, that limits the space that you have for the goats. We used to do goats on 1 acre, and now we've moved to 36 acres. So on the 1 acre, we did have as many as 56 goats, but that was including all the kids that we had. But that's why we were having to dry lot them. We fed them hay year-round and alfalfa pellets. And what we did was they were on half an acre, and we split that into 3 sections so we could rotate them. We did still have a little bit of pasture for them. We did grow grass. You guys can see that in some of our early videos. About a year ago. You can look those up to see those. But now we've moved on to 36, and we split the pastures into about 5-acre sections, and that way we can rotate the goats on a lot more land. So if you're going to be pasture raising goats, specifically just pasture, you can only run about 4 to 6 goats per acre, and that will keep them from eating down the grass too much, where they can be able to pasture raise almost year round, depending on your climate. So now we're going to move on to housing. So with housing your goats for a shelter, they're pretty easy. So goats just need a 3-sided to a 3.5-sided shelter. This is just going to block any wind from most directions of your land. So you're going to make sure you want to face it the right direction depending on where most of your wind comes from. That way it doesn't blow right into the shelter. Then you're going to need a nice roof that doesn't leak. This is going to prevent them from getting wet from rain or snow, depending on the type of weather and climate you're in. So goats will typically not use the shelter unless they absolutely feel they need to. Some of our goats will actually go out there in the rain and the wind and the snow and just lay up under trees, preferring that scenario over a shelter. Goats do not need a heat supply. Most people think that goats need the extra stuff, but they're actually built to withstand a lot of different climate changes, and their hair will change as well during the year. So all goats produce cashmere, and some will produce a lot, some will produce very little, but what it is, it's their undercoat, and this will prevent them from getting cold in the wintertime. What happens is when they get cold, their hair stands up, and that that cashmere underneath really fluffs up, and this will insulate them. So when you put a jacket on a goat, you're pushing their hair down, and they're unable to help insulate themselves. So they actually will get colder wearing a jacket. Also, if any moisture gets underneath the jacket and it gets their hair wet, then that will also keep them chilled. So it's best not to use jackets on goats. Also, it's not a good idea to use heat lamps in a barn. I've seen many incidences where people used heat lamps, it got knocked over, and they burnt their barn down and some of their animals in the barn. So it's not a good idea to use heat lamps. That's like the worst case scenario, and I definitely just would not recommend it. So another thing that you want to be careful about is if you're going to be bringing your goats in the house. Some people like to keep them as pets, but the constant in and out temperature changes can also affect them. We typically keep our houses a lot warmer than it is outside in the middle of the night. So if you're going to be bringing your goats in and then you put them out during the day, just make sure the temperature is the same. Otherwise, the goats can be fine outside. We have newborn babies where if something happened to the mother, and we have bottle babies, the bottle babies are still outside with the herd. We just go out there and feed them. So the reason you want to be careful with temperature changes is this is when pneumonia can set in. It doesn't matter if it's in the middle of summer or in the middle of winter. They can get pneumonia no matter what the temperature is. It just depends if it's constant, sudden extremes of temperature changes. So as far as what we use inside the housing for bedding is if you use straw is hollow, and it can typically house fleas and lice, and then your goats will get this problem where they start itching and then you realize they're full of bugs. We typically like to use wood shavings, and we stick with the pine. Cedar can be rough on them, especially if they inhale the fibers of it in the dust. So you want to stick with pine shavings. You can use straw, but you just have to know that there's that chance that you could be bringing in bugs. And if you have a larger herd or multiple goats, they don't always like to lay next to each other in the houses. And so what they'll do is one goat will take over half the house or the entire house. And so what we do is sometimes, depending on the size of the house, we'll actually split it using just a pallet and make it a solid piece of separation. Where it's still open, but they can go around the corner behind the pallet and hide away from the other goats, and so then they'll actually lay next to each other with just that separation, and more goats can use the house that way. So there's multiple ways of cleaning out your houses for the goats. There's what they call deep bedding, and if you have like a dirt floor, some people will throw in their bedding, whether it's shavings or straw, and then when it gets pretty covered in poop or pee, they'll add more. So as you're deep bedding, you're causing more insulation, which will keep the barn warmer. And then in the spring, they will go in with their tractor or do it by hand. They'll dig all that out and clean the stall. Like us, we now have a wood floor, and so what we're doing is we're cleaning that. Depending on how quickly they make it smell, we'll be cleaning that every couple weeks to a month, just to make sure that you don't have that urine smell too strong in the barn. Well, I hope this was very helpful for you guys. We'll be doing another video, so keep watching. And we're doing a series of 5 videos on raising goats, so this is our second one. We have 3 more to go. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you again soon.